When it comes to legendary Japanese off-road SUVs, it doesn't get much more iconic than a Toyota Land Cruiser. This nameplate has been available in the States for about 65 years, and in that time frame, it has grown a huge, loyal following because of its legendary build quality and its reputation for go-anywhere capability. Now, sadly, here in America, the Land Cruiser nameplate was discontinued back in 2021, but for 2024, Toyota has brought it back as a new animal because this model is now built off of the Land Cruiser Prado, a slightly smaller but still body-on-frame truck-based SUV, and for the first time ever, the V8 has been replaced with a new turbo hybrid powertrain. It has an all-new boxy look on the outside and an all-new interior that finally has today's modern tech that buyers expect. So as you can see, this week, Toyota has loaned us the base version known as the Land Cruiser 1958. We're gonna live with this truck for a week. We're gonna put it through our usual battery of tests. At the end of this video, we're gonna find out, does this new Land Cruiser live up to its legendary nameplate? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the exterior styling changes for this all-new 7th generation Land Cruiser here in the States, I thought I'd pop the hood and show you guys what's powering this thing. Now, the previous generation here in America was offered with a naturally aspirated 5.7 liter V8, which was legendary, but it also was very thirsty. It's been replaced by a new 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder with a 48 horsepower electric motor sandwiched between it and the transmission. Now, if you guys have been following the latest crop of Toyota hybrid powertrains, you'll recognize this engine as the new 2.4 liter turbo 4-cylinder that essentially has replaced the V6, the naturally aspirated V6 in their lineup. However, in the Land Cruiser, it comes standard with the iForce Max powertrain, which essentially you're going to find this engine in the new Toyota Tacoma and the upcoming Toyota 4Runner. It has basically that 48 horsepower electric motor sandwiched between the engine and the 8-speed automatic transmission. The engine on its own delivers around 278 horsepower. Plus the 48 horsepower from the electric motor, you get a maximum of 326 horsepower, and you also get up to 465 pound-feet of torque. That horsepower figure is less versus the old V8, but it does have around 60-ish more pound-feet of torque, which is going to help, of course, with acceleration. Like I said earlier, an 8-speed automatic, which is actually the same amount of gears as the previous generation, but it is a different transmission, obviously. Now, all Land Cruisers come standard with the company's full-time 4-wheel drive system with a 2-speed transfer case. You also have a locking center and rear differential. The upper trims will give you a disconnecting front sway bar. This 1958, however, doesn't have it. And then, of course, this being a hybrid with a 1.87 kilowatt-hour nickel metal hydride battery that lives under the cargo floor, you have much improved fuel efficiency. This model is rated at 22 in the city and 25 on the highway. Around 23 combined. That's a 9 mpg improvement over the old V8. So this is a big improvement, and this is also considerably better versus this car's platform mate, the Lexus GX, which only gets around 17 mpg combined with its twin turbocharged V6. You have a 18-gallon fuel tank, which means this vehicle should do around 400 miles of range on a full tank. It is required to run on premium, sadly, which will eat into your fuel savings a little bit. Toyota doesn't quote a 0 to 60 time. I've never 0 to 60 tested a Land Cruiser before, so we'll get out on the road and see what we can get. It has a top speed of around 105 miles an hour, and this vehicle will still tow a maximum of 6,000 pounds. That is sadly about 2,000 pounds less versus the old Land Cruiser, and that's because I suspect it has to do with the weight limits of this turbocharged 4-cylinder hybrid powertrain. In terms of the curb weight, the new Land Cruiser is considerably lighter than the old V8. As this model sits, it weighs in at just over 5,000 pounds. But closing the hood, let's go ahead and talk about the exterior styling, specifically of this 1958 model. You can see it's painted in a color known as Meteor Shower. You can basically take your pick between either black, white, or gray, like my test car. The 1958 is only available with 3 colors. If you want more colors, you got to step it up to the Land Cruiser or the first edition. I have to say, this color, Meteor Shower, definitely looks fantastic in the sunlight with the metallic fleck. I also love the heritage-inspired round headlights that come standard on this trim. You can see all Land Cruisers, even the base, have full LED headlights with an LED daytime running light, LED turn signals. You also have LED fog lights down there. This headlight also comes on the first edition. The mid-trim Land Cruiser has square headlights, but also Toyota basically wanted this look of the new Land Cruiser to resemble the J60 Land Cruisers from the 1980s, and I think they definitely succeeded. You can see it's got the heritage-inspired Toyota grille with the Toyota spelled out boldly across the middle of it. You can see also the front bumper is unpainted on this trim, It'll be painted on the first edition, which Toyota is only building around 5,000 of them. My particular test car here also has the optional accessories, front skid plates and skid plates for the transmission. That's like an extra $700 if you want to add it. The new Land Cruiser has around a 31-degree approach angle, which is far better than the GX because of the lower front overhang, and you also have roughly 8 inches of ground clearance. But moving around the side profile, you can see I love the boxy look of this vehicle. It really, shows off the heritage theme of the car, and it also gives it a tough and rugged image to it. It rides on the same 112.2-inch wheelbase. Its overall length is 193.9. So compared to the previous generation Land Cruiser, the 200 series, this is only around 1.2 inches shorter. They have the same wheelbase. It's a little bit lower in height. It's also a little bit narrower, I believe, in the width, but it's more manageable to drive in day-to-day traffic and if you guys plan to go off-roading. Compared to the GX, this is around 3 inches shorter. Compared to the new 4Runner, which is coming out later this year, this is around an inch shorter as well, but it's also around 6 inches taller. So that's gonna give you more headroom inside. You can see this base version also comes with a very basic wheel. These are the 18-inch kind of gloss gray wheel with multiple spokes. I actually like the way the wheel looks. What I don't like are these Yokohama Geolander all-season tires. These are also riding on a 245 by 70 R18 tire. Keep in mind, it's like a 31-inch tire. If you guys want a bigger wheel, the upper trims will have a 265 width tire with an actual all-terrain. So that's something to keep in mind. These tires for me are kind of like a throwaway. You have an independent front suspension, no adaptive dampers. You have a solid axle at the back. Like I said earlier, 8 inches of ground clearance. The bigger wheels and tires, I think, will increase that to around 8.7 inches of ground clearance. The brake rotors measure 17 inches with the caliper over it. Toyota didn't disclose how big the rotor is just by itself. You can see the wheel arch trim is unpainted. It also has these bulging fenders flares, which I like. The mirrors are also surprisingly still power folding, but they're unpainted. You have integrated turn signals. No 360 camera on this trim. You can get it on the upper trims. I love the kind of squared off look of the vehicle. And then if you guys want a sunroof, it's not available on this trim, but it's available on the other trims of the Land Cruiser. My test car for $1,400 also has the roof rails and the roof crossbars, which are very sturdy, and it'll be great if you guys plan to do some overlanding and off-roading. Now you can see moving around the rest of the profile, again, it's instantly recognizable as a Land Cruiser. This thing definitely takes or turns a lot of heads when you drive it out on the road because it just went on sale, and it also, people just know instantly what it is. And then moving around the rear, you can see the rear design is just as handsome as the front for me. In terms of the styling compared to this and the GX and the new 4Runner, I mean, all of them to me look fantastic, but for those of you who want a Land Cruiser, I think Toyota did a fantastic job with the look of the new version. You can see the taillights are full LED turn signal, brake light, reverse lights. There's a small Land Cruiser badge here, along with the Heritage Toyota script back here. And then of course, iForce Max, there's the new Beyond Zero badge. All Land Cruisers come with this hybrid powertrain, so keep that in mind. I suspect this powertrain will also make its way under the hood of the Lexus GX at some point. Take this little cover off, and then it'll reveal the built-in tow hitch. You can see you also have a full-size matching alloy spare wheel underneath there, along with a tucked-away rear exhaust tip. And then, just like the previous gen, you also have a way that you can open up the rear glass if you need to just access the cargo area, if you're parked on an incline so stuff doesn't fly out. And then this trim here, sadly, does not come with a power liftgate. I wish Toyota would offer it as like an option package. You have to step it up to the larger, or the mid-level Land Cruiser trim to get the power liftgate. But as you can see, the split tailgate is gone. It's been replaced by a standard traditional swing or open up tailgate, lift up tailgate. And then you can see with this cargo floor, other markets of this Land Cruiser will offer a third row, not here in America, but you can see the cup holders and the USB charging ports carry over. I guess that could be nice if you plan to like lay a bed back here and sleep back here. You still have cup holders and a USB. You also have rear seat air conditioning vents on the third row area, but there's no third row. But sadly, with that 1.87 kilowatt hour battery pack, it does raise the floor of this vehicle by about 4 inches. There is a little bit of underfloor storage underneath there, but in general, Toyota says you get around 37.5 cubic feet of cargo space with the second row up. That's around 5 cubic feet less versus the previous generation, but again, that's all because of the battery pack. It also has around 8 cubic feet less versus the Lexus GX Overtrail, which doesn't have the battery pack because it doesn't have the hybrid system. It doesn't raise up the floor. Toyota says you can still fold down that second row, but they didn't quote a number here when the second row is folded. I'd estimate it to be around 75 cubic feet of space based on what you see, of course, in the Lexus GX. But overall, as a two-row vehicle, it does offer a good amount of space, but just know you have to deal with that raised up floor because of the hybrid system. So moving on to the interior of this brand new 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser 1958. Before we get inside, however, let me show you guys the key fob. You can see this is Toyota's current intelligent access key. Surprisingly, there's no Toyota logo on the back. It's instead on the front of the vehicle. And because this is the base trim with no power liftgate, it's very basic in terms of buttons. You have unlock, or lock, unlock, and then panic. No power liftgate function whatsoever. At least there still is remote start from the fob. You push the lock button 3 times and then hold it on the third. That'll turn the vehicle on via the remote start. If you guys go for the upper trims, Toyota also offers their digital key where you can use your smartphone as a key. Not so the case on this base trim. Now you can see the door handles, they're black painted. Traditional, I touched that little area there that locks the door, and it also will power fold the mirrors. Love the fact that the base trim still gets power folding mirrors and integrated turn signals. Touch the back of the door handle, that's what unlocks the door for you. And then looking at the interior, I hope you guys like a dark interior, a black interior, because this is your only color combination you can get with the base trim. You can see these cloth bucket seats are also manually adjustable. They are still 3-level heated. And I also love the cloth material. It really reminds me of like Toyotas from the 1990s with this kind of design of the cloth. The material feels nice. The padding is also nice and cushy. So for a base seat, I think the fabric looks nice. What I don't like, however, are the 6-way manual adjustments. I think at this price point, still, Toyota should give you power seats and a power liftgate. But again, you can easily spend another $6 grand, step it up to the mid-level Land Cruiser trim. You'll include the Softex fake leather with the 8-way power, or 10-way power, and the heated and ventilated seats. And you can also get real leather as part of a premium package. It's standard on the first edition. You can see the door panels. It's just a sea of black plastic, and unfortunately it's also a cheaper plastic. So you can see here, it's all hard touch plastic everywhere, and it's also hard touch plastic here. This is unacceptable to me. Again, the upper trims of the Land Cruiser will have soft touch here and soft touch leather stitching over here, which is where my elbows rest. So again, I don't really like this on the base trim. Window controls, they're one touch for all 4, which I like. They're also illuminated. You still have the power window controls here and the folding mirrors. Down here you can see it's all hard touch plastic with some storage. You have a 6-speaker bass sound system, which is a throwaway. The upper trims will have a 10-speaker, and then there's a 14-speaker JBL if you guys go for the premium package on the mid-level Land Cruiser trim. Now, you can get an accessory for step rails. My test car doesn't have it, so there's a nice grab handle here, and I can essentially hoist myself up. It's not as hard to get into as you'd expect because it only has 8 inches of ground clearance, but as I shut the door has a nice solid sounding thunk, so that does add to the impression of quality. Now, of course, once you're inside here, the start-stop button is where you'd expect it to be, but it's hidden by the steering wheel. And then you can see, because it's a hybrid, a full hybrid, not a mild hybrid, the engine just kind of whirs to life. It doesn't have that traditional starter noise, but you do hear, of course, a 4-cylinder engine. It doesn't sound obviously as smooth or refined as the old V8, but we'll try that. We'll talk about that more when we get into the driving scene. You can see in terms of the rest of the interior, this base trim definitely gets a downgrade in terms of the technology. So here in the instrument panel, we have a smaller 7-inch digital cluster with a mixture of some analog dials. The Land Cruiser mid-trim will come with the full 12.3-inch display. At least you still get a leather-wrapped steering wheel, which is nice with the Toyota heritage script here in the actual airbag cover. The wheel itself is manual tilt and telescoping. The Land Cruiser trim and up will include a power tilt telescoping wheel. No paddles behind the wheel, but you still get controls here to adjust, of course, your little screen over here where you can still change the way the dials look and change the trip computer information. I don't love the piano black plastic that you find here. You can see your Toyota Safety Sense 3.0 controls are located on this side, where this vehicle does have pre-collision assist, adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking, lane keep assist. All that stuff is standard, at least even on this base trim, which I appreciate. The horn, it actually sounds a little bit like it was pulled out of like a Toyota Camry. I actually don't like the tone of the horn, especially for a Land Cruiser. The turn signal stalks are all traditional Toyota. It finally has the 3 blinks, which the previous generation didn't have. You can see more controls here for the auto headlights, the dimmer control, rear parking sensors, and then you have that 120 outlet back there, which has a 2400 watt inverter. That's significantly more versus the Lexus GX because of the hybrid system. You have a trailer brake controller over here if you guys plan to tow. And then, as you can see, no heads-up display. You get that on the upper trims, but you do have hard touch plastic here. But on this portion of the dash, you can see it is a soft touch plastic, but it definitely feels cheap. I don't like the graining material. Down here, you can see it's also a scratchy hard plastic. And then, of course, here in the center, you have the smaller 8-inch Toyota audio multimedia interface. Now, thankfully, it does have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but as you can see from the huge bezel surrounding the screen, it just looks like you cheaped out. So Remember, the mid-trim will come with their 12.3-inch display, so it gets rid of this, and it just makes the screen look far better integrated with the 12.3-inch cluster. This is the 7-inch and the 8-inch here. So I think Toyota should offer a package that will, or a convenience package that will roll in the larger screen. On the base version, you again have to step it up to the mid-trim. Now you can see over here, I like the fact that Toyota also includes lots of hard buttons and knobs. You can see the air vents are very traditional in the way you adjust them. You have buttons here for the 3-level heated seats. There's an empty space here where you'd have cooled seats. You have tri-zone automatic climate control. You have 3 USB ports here, a total of 6 in the vehicle. There's some empty buttons here to show you that you cheaped out and didn't spend enough money. There's a tow haul mode in the transmission selector, and then your drive mode selector is here. You can see there's a sport, normal, and an eco, and then there's also a button here where it will start the vehicle out in second gear. There's a downhill assist and crawl control as well when you're in 4-wheel drive that'll allow you to adjust that. What you don't get, however, is the multi-terrain select that you get in the upper trims, where you can kind of custom program the terrain and the computer to tell it what kind of asphalt or pavement you're on. You do still get their A-Track traction control system, but again, not the multi-terrain select. This controls the 8-speed automatic transmission. You have a manual mode here, no sport mode here. It's just in the dial here. You do lose the wireless phone charging pad. That is included if you guys go for the upper trim. You have an electronic parking brake here. Your locking center and rear diff control is right here, along with the 4-wheel drive switch. It's just a simple toggle that goes between high 4 and low 4. This is where you could disconnect the front sway bar on the upper trims, but not on this trim. You can see cup holders here, padded center console here, which is nice. Open this up, you can see it's got a pretty deep center console area. But keep in mind, if you guys go for the cool box package, it'll kind of shrink that, but it'll turn this into a cooler, which is great on those longer trips. Like I mentioned earlier, I love the cloth seats. They're also comfortable and supportive, but I don't like the manual adjustments. Again, you also lose the cooled functionality. Open that up, you can see the glove box it goes into the dash. It's actually big. It's damped, but not lined with felt. You still have an auto-dimming rearview mirror, which is nice, but upper trims will give you a digital camera rearview mirror. You also have LED map lighting and tons of headroom space because it doesn't have a sunroof. There is a really cheap material here on the actual sun visor. You still have illuminated mirror controls or sun visor mirrors, which is nice. And overall, you can see the build quality is fine. It's just the material quality has definitely cheaped out. You have a nice commanding view of the road, but at least most of the tech features that you want are here. You just have to deal with the fact that it has a smaller screen and cheaper materials. But let's go ahead and hop into the back seat of the new Land Cruiser, because this vehicle is now only a 2-row here in the States. And when I open up the door, you can see the door opens up fairly large, but it could be larger, especially if you want to put a child seat back here. Just like in the front seat area, you have hard touch plastic materials everywhere on this entire door panel here, along with cheap plastic over here. The beautiful 90s inspired cloth is also carried over. And then if I want, I can also fold this seat down and flip it forward, which is kind of a remnants of a 3rd row, but there's no 3rd row, obviously. If I fold this seat down, it does create almost a flat floor, although right here you can see it's not quite at the same level. Stuff will fall into here, so that's a consequence that you have to deal, of course, with the battery pack being there. This seat also gives you the ability to kind of recline as well. You can recline it back or fold it forward, so that's definitely a nice touch. And then getting back here, you can see there's a nice grab handle where I can basically hoist myself in. Now, Toyota says the legroom in the 2nd row, at least on their media site as of this filming, is 26.7 inches. That's really small. I suspect that's a typo. I think this has roughly 36.7 inches, which would make more sense. It would have around 2 inches more rear seat legroom than the previous generation, which again would make sense. You can see there's not a flat floor here. There is a hump for the drive line to kind of go into the rear axle. You can see you have your own set of climate controls. No heated rear seats back here. You do have 2 storage cubbies, which is nice. You also have rear seat air conditioning vents on the ceiling. You have a map light back here, and then you can see there's an armrest that folds down, gives you 2 cup holders, which is nice for 2 people across. And then in terms of the headroom space, you can see because the roof is 6 inches higher than the Toyota 4Runner, you're going to have a ton of headroom clearance back here. So it's again one of the reasons why you want to choose the Land Cruiser. But overall, the back seat, the 2nd row area, it has a fairly good amount of space, but I personally would like to test out the upper trim just because I'm not liking the cheap materials. But at least Toyota still gave you 2 USB charging ports, a power outlet, and your own set of climate controls, which is a nice touch even for this base trim. So here we are back behind the wheel of the legendary Toyota Land Cruiser. In fact, the last time I had this vehicle for testing in this area, in my home area, it was about 3.5 years ago when I had the 2021 J200 series Land Cruiser, the Heritage Edition. It was the final model year of that vehicle, and even though it was basically due for a replacement, I still found plenty to like about the vehicle, and it's no reason, or it's no shocker to me that it remains, a legendary vehicle in Toyota's lineup. But this new Land Cruiser is a very different beast, because because as you guys know, it's built off of the Land Cruiser Prado Series 250 architecture, but it also shares its TNGA-FR architecture with the big J Series 300 Land Cruiser. So let's go ahead and see what we can get 0 to 60 wise in this vehicle, because remember, it has a new hybrid powertrain, and the hybrid powertrain delivers up to 326 horsepower, 465 pound-feet of torque. I haven't 0 to 60 tested this vehicle, but let's go ahead and see what we can get. We're going to brake torque it. Definitely didn't like brake torquing it. So don't want to do that again, because that seriously slowed the car down tremendously. 8.4 seconds. We'll try it up ahead there later on. Again, this is my first time actually 0 to 60 testing the car. I also want to remind you guys, on that same stretch, I got 6.4 seconds in the Lexus GX 550. So we're going to go up here to the next point, and we're going to try another 0 to 60 run. I'll try it again at another point where it's a more level surface, just like it was back there. But it was really weird how the car kind of lurched and then lagged, and then it short shifted very abruptly. So clearly, the Hybrid Max powertrain doesn't like being brake torqued. And again, I haven't driven this Land Cruiser out on the road until today, so it's really interesting to finally get the vehicle out on the road. The last time I drove this vehicle, we were only allowed to drive it on an off-road course. So again, we're still in sport mode here. We're going to basically just floor it. Short shifts at around 5,500 RPM, goes to 6,000 there. 8.39 seconds there, so still not the quickest acceleration. Now that is more going slightly uphill. We're gonna try it up ahead there at that last stretch and see what we can actually get. This car, for me, it feels like it should do it in the 7.5 second range. I mean, clearly the twin turbo V6 in the Lexus is going to be the quicker option. But what really shocks me about the Hybrid Max powertrain is, you know, we went from a naturally aspirated V8 to a 2.4 liter turbo 4 with this 50 horsepower electric motor sandwiched between the engine and the 8-speed automatic transmission. And the great thing about this hybrid powertrain is it's got it only has one electric motor, and it's not like a CVT or a planetary system like in Toyota's traditional hybrids. So you essentially get a traditional, you know, driveline connection between the front and rear axles. You still have a 2-speed transfer case. You have a locking center and rear differential. This car drives like a conventional vehicle. What you just notice is the hybrid powertrain essentially adding its low-end torque from the start. So typically with a turbo gas engine, you feel a lot of lag. In this car, you don't have that, because when I put my foot down, the electric motor offers its instant assist, and then once it runs out of steam, the turbo kicks in, and then the gas engine takes over, so you have continuous thrust. Now, the one thing about this engine is it tries to sound like a little bit more guttural, like a 6-cylinder, but there's a little bit of buzziness that I'm feeling, you know, coming through the pedals. It still, to me, reminds me a lot of a 4-cylinder. So that's something that you have to get used to. What you will really enjoy, however, is the way improvement in fuel efficiency, which I'll talk about later on. This vehicle continues, as you guys know, to be riding on a body-on-frame architecture with an independent front suspension, a multi-link live axle at the back. You can really feel that nice surge of power. It feels quick, actually. So even though, you know, so far the 2 0 to 60 times I've gotten are a little disappointing, in real world driving, people I think are going to be, you know, appreciative of this powertrain. I also love the smoothness of the 8-speed auto, and you also have this wonderful commanding view of the road that is befitting of a Land Cruiser. It's one of the reasons why people love this vehicle. It just makes you feel like king of the road. So here's that last straight here that's completely flat. We're just gonna basically floor it. Quick off the line, but come on, break into the 7s, car. You can do it. 7.82, so that's a much better time. Again, if you brake torque it, it's gonna slow it down by a half a second. 7.2 or 7.82 is a little on the disappointing side, although I never had a chance to 0 to 60 test the previous generation Land Cruiser with its V8, but it's, again, another reason why you wanna choose the Lexus GX, because the GX is around 1.3 seconds faster, 1.4 seconds faster 0 to 60. So if that's important to you, go with the Lexus with its twin turbo V6. But in terms of the rest of the driving dynamics, I'm going to switch the drive mode here into its normal setting. This car doesn't have any kind of adaptive dampers, so it really just affects the throttle sensitivity and the transmission shift programming. The vehicle itself is a really easy to drive vehicle. I mean, it does feel like it takes up a good chunk of the road, and it's also not sporty at all. The body leans a lot. The suspension's very soft. That's going to be great for the ride quality, however, because, you know, just hopping out of the GX with those big 22-inch wheels and the adaptive dampers, I noticed the Lexus crashed a lot over bumps. It constantly reminded you that you were in a body-on-frame vehicle. I mean, obviously this does the same thing, but with the smaller 18-inch wheels and the standard, you know, steel suspension that has no adaptive dampers, the passive dampers, this truck actually rides really well. I'm shocked that a set of wheels makes such a huge difference, and it's one of the reasons why you may want to consider the GX in the Overtrail or in the premium trim with its smaller 20-inch wheels. This vehicle also is relatively quiet as well. I mean, my test car has that optional roof basket on the roof for $1,400, and there is some wind noise at higher speeds, definitely a lot of wind noise. So I would probably skip that unless you guys really need that for overlanding. But this is also still a box, so it's going to have the aerodynamic efficiency of a brick. But again, if you are used to the previous generation Land Cruiser, this should feel pretty familiar, but the seats are also really comfortable. I love these heritage cloth seats. I really typically don't like cloth seats, but in this application, the padding is really plush. You still get heated seats. I do wish that Toyota would offer their Softex and a power seat as an option on the 1958. You have to step it up to the mid-level Land Cruiser trim to get the Softex with the power seats and the ventilated seats. But the steering wheel feels nice in your hands. The wheel itself is relatively quick and precise, but as you guys saw, the whole body will just lean and wallow about because of the super soft suspension. So that's something to keep in mind. In terms of the fuel efficiency, this vehicle is rated to get 22 in the city, 25 on the highway. In my week's worth of testing, I averaged around 22 mpg in mostly mixed driving, which is actually excellent. Compared to the GX with its twin-turbo V6, I averaged only 16, 17 mpg in that vehicle. This is significantly better. On the highway, I was able to get around 24 mpg. So again, much better fuel efficiency, literally like 10 mpg better than the previous V8. So bravo Toyota on the hybrid powertrain. I expect this hybrid to also make its way under the hood of the GX, but I do hope that it gets more power because that 0 to 60 time is disappointing, especially if you're going to stuff it into a luxury vehicle. But again, it's all about the feel, and in terms of real world performance, nobody's going to be complaining about this engine. Maybe, you know, complaining about the sound compared to the old V8, but it just offers a really nice strong rush of low end pull, instantaneous pull because of the electric motor torque. And then of course, once it runs out, the turbo gas engine kicks in and it just feels like it's got plenty of power to do most of the activities you need to do, especially if you need to tow or go off-roading. But overall, you know, with the Land Cruiser returning, it makes for a very confusing lineup at Toyota because the 4Runner is also coming back as an all-new model as well later this year, toward the end of the year. So it makes you wonder, how do you decide between this, a 4Runner, and of course a Lexus GX? I mean, me personally, I might still go for the GX, although this hybrid powertrain is very tempting, and this model here with its starting price of 56 grand is certainly much more reasonable. Although if you spec up a Land Cruiser with the bells and whistles that you probably want, you're going to be spending around 65 to 70,000, which again, at that point you may as well just go to the Lexus for 64 grand. But overall, I'm happy that the Land Cruiser has returned, but just like the previous generation, choosing this model over anything else in the Toyota lineup is really going to come down to you wanting to drive a Land Cruiser. You want the Land Cruiser name and the heritage that comes with the name. So after finally spending a full week with the reincarnated Toyota Land Cruiser, I have to say, when this vehicle was first announced to be coming back last year, I was super excited because the Land Cruiser, as you guys know, has a ton of heritage for Toyota. It's been around for so long, so I was sad when the old one was discontinued, but this new version, some of you may argue that it's not technically an actual Land Cruiser, but I would argue that it is because the Land Cruiser Prado is essentially built off of the same J300 series TNGA F frame. It does have that new hybrid powertrain. It's only slightly smaller on the outside and you don't get the third row, but I think that's a good thing because Toyota is trying to reposition the Land Cruiser. I mean, obviously it still slots between the Toyota 4Runner and the Toyota Sequoia, and of course there's the Lexus GX, which is essentially the luxury version of this. I fell in love with the GX when I drove it for a full week last week, so after spending a full week with the Land Cruiser, I have to say, here are my thoughts on the vehicle. First of all, just like its previous generations, it's never going to let you forget that it's a body-on-frame vehicle, but it also is still a really refined SUV that has a good ride quality, especially if you guys go for the smaller wheels and tires. It has also a quiet interior, although I would skip that if you guys are looking, to have less wind noise out on the highway. In terms of the acceleration, the new Hybrid Max powertrain is a mixed bag for me because in terms of just daily driving, I like it. It has plenty of low-end torque. The electric motor also will deliver electric-only power at very, very low speeds, although it's not quite as, predominant as what you're going to find from Toyota's other hybrids that use a CVT that have an electric motor on the rear end. It still gives you that electric motor only power at low speeds, especially if you're stuck in traffic. That's going to help you save on fuel. It also feels quick in day-to-day driving. It has a smooth 8-speed automatic, but in terms of the performance and numbers, 0 to 60 was a little disappointing. 7.8 seconds should be good for most people, but again, in terms of on paper, it's definitely a lot slower versus the twin-turbo V6. It also doesn't have the sound of the twin-turbo V6, but I suspect that the fuel economy improvements are going to be worth it, especially if you guys are trading in your old Land Cruiser and you're tired of getting, 12 to 14 mpg in actual real-world driving. The interior as well, this particular trim here has lots of cheap materials, but again, you can skip that by going with the regular Land Cruiser for an extra $6,000. I personally would do that because while I did like the cloth seats in this trim, what I didn't like is the smaller infotainment screen, the smaller instrument panel, the lack of a power liftgate, and the lack of power seats. I think, even at this price, Toyota should include it already. Considering the fact that the Land Cruiser is still considered more of a premium vehicle, even though in other markets you can get it as a bare bones stripper model. It really doesn't have that reputation here in the US. And in terms of the rest of the driving dynamics, I think most people who are coming from a body-on-frame SUV are looking for, something that has this kind of capability. There's still plenty to like about this new Land Cruiser, which brings us, of course, to the pricing of this vehicle, because the old Land Cruiser was around $90,000 to start for the US market, which was just absolutely insane. It's one of the reasons why Toyota only did around 3,000 units every year. It was kind of a niche vehicle. For this new version, I expect Toyota to probably triple production, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're targeting around 10,000 units a year, which they should hit, because the new base price of this model, which I'm essentially showing you, is $55,950. That's before the $1,300 destination charge. My tester, of course, with some of the options, accessories that it has, like the skid plates and the roof rack, comes in at just under 60 grand, around $59,550. which is around $5,000 less expensive versus the Lexus GX in the base premium configuration. At that point, I personally would just go for the base GX, although the GX is going to use considerably more fuel, but it'll have a much nicer interior. It'll come with a third row, and it also will have that Lexus, badge there, so you get the dealership experience. Now, if you guys want to go to the mid-trim Land Cruiser, it's going to cost you around $62,000, and it will include most of the options that you want. There is a premium package for around $4,600 that'll throw in like a sunroof, the cooled center console, the JBL sound system, of course, the digital camera rearview mirror, the real leather trim. That's going to push you the price to around 70 grand. And then for those of you who must have the heritage-inspired first edition, that's going to cost around $75,000. So again, keep that in mind if you guys are looking for this vehicle. The top trims are essentially going to be Lexus GX over trail money. And then of course, there's the new Toyota 4Runner, which is coming out later this year. I suspect the 4Runner with the Hybrid Max powertrain will probably come in at around $50,000, so 5 grand less, but we won't know, of course, until Toyota releases final pricing on that toward the end of this year. But with all that said, I'm happy that the Land Cruiser has returned, but again, it's still kind of a niche vehicle that competes with a lot of other Toyota and Lexus's vehicles, so choosing it is really going to depend on if you guys want to drive a vehicle that has the Land Cruiser name. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the brand new 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser in this 1958 trim. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.